Hey there, South Rock students, and some of you that aren't students but continuing to watch along on our online impacts as we're doing this Curveball series. Today I want to start out by getting you to use your imagination. Some of you use it all the time, some of you have kind of tucked it away and not used it for quite a while. But I want you to imagine if you could put two animals together and they'd make a fun combination, what two animals would you combine? You know, you could combine the lion and the tiger to make a liger, as told about in Napoleon Dynamite, but what other animals would you do? You know, when we did this online with our students the other day through a Zoom conference, someone came up with the idea of mixing a rabbit and a sea cucumber. And can you imagine what that would look like? Or someone else said, how about like an elephant and a chihuahua? You know, I was thinking through things. What if you did something like, you know, a millipede and like the neck and head of a giraffe? Or what if you combined, you know, an otter and a duck and a beaver, and what would that look like? Well, I guess that would be a platypus, and so we don't really have to imagine because you could see what God made with that. But there are these things that we could use our imaginations at. We could also do things about, man, if you could imagine being someone for an evening, who would you be? And maybe there's an individual name. You'd be like, I'd love to be this person for an evening. Or maybe it's not an actual person, but it's in the place of someone, like a title. And so maybe you could imagine being that. When we met as a youth group, again with students online, we played a game called Imagine If. And I don't know if you've ever played it, but it gets you to use your imagination. It might say, imagine if these two people were the ones who were dancing. You know, which one would fall and break their leg or something like that. And so it's fun sometimes to imagine things. But I want you for today to imagine yourself if you lived in a land where there was nothing but bad kings. And what I mean by that is these kings worship other gods. They do not worship the true God, and they make their country, all the people who follow them, do the same thing. But then imagine that God tells you, I'm going to send you to go tell this king a message. And you go and deliver that message, and then he leads you off. And so you follow him basically off the beaten path. But God takes care of you. And so for a while, you're there, and eventually he says it's now time for a new mission. And so you go to this person, and this person is hospitable, and you begin staying with them for quite a while. And everything seems to be going well until an event happens so big that it causes the person that you're staying with to become angry with you. Like this curveball enters into life. And the thing is, you had nothing to do with this. This was all God, and yet you're kind of being blamed. I wonder, what would you do? Well, that's what's happening in our text today as we look at a man named Elijah. And for those of you guys who went to Mix or Move last year, you remember some of these stories as we looked at this man named Elijah and how God used him. But you need to kind of know the setting. The king that is over the area, his name is Ahab, and he is an evil king. In fact, the text tells us he was more evil than any of the kings before him. What also did not help him out is that he had married a woman named Jezebel, and she was pretty evil too. Well, during this time, God says, hey, I'm going to send you, Elijah, to deliver a message. And so he goes to the king and he says, there will not be any more rain in this land until I say so. And so then, as soon as he delivers his message, he goes to where God tells him. And God basically leads him to a ravine. He's out in the middle of nowhere, and God takes care of him. In fact, he gives him bread and water every morning and every evening. But maybe not in the way that we just think. He sent ravens with this food to be able to deliver it to him. Well, he's there obviously long enough that the Bible tells us that the brook dried up. You remember, it wasn't going to rain until, again, Elijah said anything. So now the water is gone, but God continues to take care of Elijah. It says, I want you to go to this other place called Zarephath, this other city. What you need to know is that in Zarephath, they did not worship the one true God. They worshiped other gods. And so Elijah is being sent to this widow. And God says, I want you to tell this widow, make me a meal. And so Elijah does it. He sees this widow and he says, hey, I want you to make me a meal. And the woman says, you know, I don't have enough food for that. Like basically, I have enough food to go home and make one meal for my son and I. We plan to eat it, and then we're going to die. Like we have nothing left, and so I have nothing to offer you. And yet Elijah says, trust me in this. If you will give me dinner first and then do what you want, my God will take care of you. And so she chooses to trust. Maybe she's like, there's no other choice, or, you know, I might as well give it a try. The options or the alternative is not looking that great either. And so she chooses to do it, and God takes care of them. In fact, it talks about how the oil and the flour, they never run out. God continues to take care of these three people, the widow, her son, and Elijah. And so things are going well. Elijah stays with her for quite a while. But as I mentioned, this curveball comes. Her son gets sick. And we don't know how long, but after a period of time, he actually quits breathing. He dies. And this woman gets mad at Elijah. And she says, why did you come here? Like, did you come so that my son would die? Did you come so that you might point out the sin that has been in my life? And I love what Elijah's response is in chapter 17, verses 19 and 20 of 1 Kings. This is what it says. Give me your son, Elijah replied. So he took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and he laid on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy upon this widow that I'm staying with by causing her son to die? And so as you read that text, Elijah is taking some sort of action. He takes the son upstairs and then just cries out to God. Like, why is this happening? I don't understand. You know, even people in the Bible who followed God didn't always understand what God was doing. And so he's like, what is supposed to happen here? But he didn't just stop there. Like sometimes when curveballs come at us, when difficult times come, we question God or maybe get angry and we just kind of stop there. But Elijah says, I'm going to take some sort of action. And so if you keep reading the text, what happens is then he stretches himself out on top of this boy who has no life and again is crying out to God that the son's life would be returned to him. And he stands up and nothing happens. And so Elijah cries out again, lays down on the boy again a second time and says, God, return this boy's life to me. And yet nothing happens. And the third time he does, that's when the life comes back to this boy. He then takes the widow down to his son, and the widow says, I now know that the word of the Lord is from your mouth, and I know that that word is true. You know what? There are curveballs in life that we're all going to be thrown. And here's what I would tell you, that God may choose to use you in places that you never expected. I mean, Elijah may not have ever expected to be going to the king to tell him a message. He may not have been expecting to go to this other country where they don't even believe in God and deliver a message, and yet he was used. And God may use you in places that you're like, I never imagined that I would be used here. I also want you to think about during difficult times, God wants us to eventually take action. Now, that doesn't mean, that we're not supposed to deal with the pain. I mean, there's a time to mourn and to grieve, but there also is a time then to take a step again, to do something, not just sit there in that. And so again, I can't tell you based on what situation you're in when that is, but there is a time to trust God and take some action again. I'd also tell you that in difficult times, sometimes God is not going to answer the way that we want. And man, I hate that sometimes. Like I really do. It's like, I want this my way. And I can't always see the big picture, but God won't always answer the way that I want. Or sometimes he just won't answer when I want it to be. Elijah had to scream or cry out 3 times. And I wonder if he's going, God, why didn't you just answer the first time? And maybe God is seeing if we're going to be faithful. The thing is, we can still trust God even when he doesn't answer the way we want or when we want. Here's the last thing I would tell you about these curveballs is the results that happen from them. Like they often affect us and they often affect other people. Like if you look at Elijah, after this moment, he continues to be used by God. And even this big meeting of, Elijah versus all the prophets of Baal. And God uses him to show who really is God. And at least with the widow, there's some sort of belief that happens here. I don't know if she completely believes in God or not, but it seems that she obviously believes Elijah really is coming from God and God's word is truth. I don't know if her life changes or not, but there is some sort of change that happens because of this event. And so in the curveballs of your life, God may use them to affect you and other people. And so don't just close your eyes and just sit in the pain. See how God may want to use you and may want to grow in you. So again, next week we'll come back for another curveball, but may we walk as Elijah did and be able to be faithful in the times of our lives that curveballs are thrown our way. Have a great week. See you later.